This is our 8th segment on Ein Sof, and it's our 3rd segment on the idea that Ein Sof involves tzimtzum, that there's different levels of Ein Sof, and that the difference between one level and another level has to do with tzimtzum, and that somehow it doesn't contradict the whole business of the Me'ein HaMoed. I want to begin this segment with the following approach. In general, when we talk about godliness, there's 2 ideas. There's godliness as it exists. Hashem is perfect, Hashem is whole, Hashem is complete, and He has no lack. So whatever could be is by Him. And the second concept of godliness is godliness as it exists in relationship with the world, which I'm going to be getting to in this segment. However, when we speak about godliness that exists as part of Hashem's perfection and wholeness, there's also 2 ideas. There is the idea that Hashem has a yochailes, Hashem is a possibility for everything. But Hashem having a possibility for everything doesn't mean He has it. Actually, just as possible. It's the notion that part of His existence, that He is a Metzias bilti Metzias. His existence is non-existential, which means He has no relationship with anything except Himself. And He's shleimus bilti chesed, He's perfect, He's holy, He has no lack, so whatever could be, He has, on a level of possibility. But then there's another idea. And the other idea is that Hashem's perfection and wholeness doesn't only exist in a way of possibility, it exists in a way of actualization. And this is the concept of oyer. Godliness expresses every possibility that Hashem has as a metzias nimtza, as an entity, as a thing, as a form. And in expressing how every possibility could exist, actually Hashem's shleimus, Hashem's wholeness and perfection doesn't only exist on a level of yochel, that it could be, that it's possible for it to be, but on a level that it actually exists. These 2 ideas, that Hashem's wholeness and perfection exist on a level of yocheles, and Hashem's wholeness and perfection exists on a level that we'll call koyach, ve'en ke'ech hasapei lamayla, on a level where it's actual, is the difference between the level of godliness, which is called yocheles, and the 2 levels of godliness, which I spoke about in the previous segment, etzem of Ein Sof and gili la'atzmei b'shvil atzmei v'makar hasev of kalan. In other words, what we discussed in the previous segment was the ideas that we know about godliness in as much as they exist vis-a-vis His wholeness. It's as if you were to say, and this is a very, very important as if, because none of these things are simple and easy, that if Hashem would not create the world, this would be. Because it's His shleimus, His perfection and wholeness. What we're going to be discussing now is the notions of godliness that have to do with worldliness, which means ideas of godliness that you would call the mechudish, not kadmin. Ideas in godliness where you wouldn't say they always existed, you wouldn't say kadmin k'kadmu ziyizbarech, you wouldn't say k'may kadmei aheder, you would say kadmei aheder. That it once wasn't and now it is. Because these ideas of godliness only exist in anticipation of the creation of a world and in the relationship that Hashem has with the world. So even though they're mechudish and they're after ratzon, still they're somehow me'ein hamoed, and they're still ha'ara, and they're still dveikus. However these things are going to be explained, I'll probably get to it in a later segment. And this is called Eses Sfiris Hagnuzes B'Matzilin. But before the Tzimtzum Rishon, and before the Tzimtzum Rishon, there's nothing but godliness. And before the Tzimtzum Rishon, there's absolutely no divisions. There's no divisions. There's no duality at all. Everything is one. There is a will for creation. And from that point where there's a will for creation, the creation, like the Chassidus brings in the Zayar, the creation exists as a part of that will, pre-Tzimtzum. And just as creation exists as part of that will, the godliness which is going to be revealed in creation also exists as part of that will. This godliness is known by a variety of names. It can be called the source of the Kav. It can be called the source of Mamalek Alamin. It can be called Chitzonius Ha'oir. Because this is a level of godliness which doesn't exist because Hashem is whole and perfect. This level of godliness exists because Hashem decided that He wishes to make a world. So obviously there's an incredible tzimtzum between the second level of godliness. Again, I'm going back to the first page of the first Maimed of the Rebbe Basei Lagani, that the first Madrega is called Etzma Ve'ein Seif. The middle Madrega is called Gili Ein Seif La'atzme B'Shvil Atzme, which is the Mokar HaSeiv El Kalam. These two levels I discussed in the previous segment. And now we're talking about Gili Ein Seif La'atzme, which is B'Shvil Ha'elubus, which is the Mokar of the source of B'Malek Lamed. This third level of godliness exists in anticipation of creation, not before. And in as much as it exists in anticipation of creation, the tzimtzum, when compared to the level of godliness which exists because of Hashem's perfection and holiness, is extraordinary. And there's a number of theoretical differences, actual differences I don't know, between the second level of godliness and the third level of godliness. And one of them is the second level of godliness has what's called Sfiris and Kates, the theoretical possibility for infinite Sfiris. And the third level of godliness has the theoretical possibility for Esesphiris Eknuzas, for 10 Sphiris, because it's the source of the world. Or to say it in different words, the difference between the second level of godliness and the third level of godliness is the second level of godliness is the Mokar of Igulim, and the third level of godliness is the Mokar of Yesher. That means the second level of godliness is going to also come through the tzimtzum and appear in the worlds. But when it's going to appear in the world, it's never going to exist in this kind of a way that it could actually be revealed in a vessel. That it could actually be contained or changed or affected by a vessel. The light is going to exist just as it is, and the vessel is either going to get it or it's not going to get it, but the light, quote, doesn't have the ability, end quote, to be adapted. The third level of Ein Seif is the Mokar of Kav. Kav means measured godliness. And most importantly, Kav means godliness that if and when there is a vessel, which we would call a Zulas, another, the light would actually be able to go into that vessel and it would change the vessel and the vessel would change the light, etc. So the second level of godliness before Tzimtzum is the source of Igulim, of godliness that when it comes into worldliness cannot change and adapt to the worldliness. It just gives the world what it is and the world either gets it or not. And the third level of godliness is called the Makar HaKav, the source of ruled and measured godliness, that when it's going to come into the worlds after the Tzimtzum, it's actually going to go into vessels. However, there's some differences of opinion in Kabbalah about how this works exactly, but basically this third level of Ein Seif, that after the Tzimtzum, it's going to be able to go into a vessel. Before the Tzimtzum, it still exists in the level of Eagle, meaning to say, the third level of godliness before the Tzimtzum is destined that through the Tzimtzum it's going to be able to go into Kelim, but as it exists before the Tzimtzum, it's not able to go into Kelim. And like I said before, there's slight differences between the way it's explained in the Samach Vav and the way it's explained in the Ayin Beis, where the Ayin Beis would attribute more ability to go into the Keli to Ein Seif Lifnei Tzimtzum than in the Samach Vav. But this is basically how it is. So this third level of godliness is very different than the first and the second level of godliness, because it's the source for godliness of 10 spheres as opposed to infinite spheres, and it exists only because Hashem decided to make a world and to be made to reveal godliness in the place of worldliness. So the tzimtzum between the second and the third level of Ein Seif Lifnei Tzimtzum is most importantly the idea of chidush, a novelty, Kodmei HaHeder, that the Eibishter, who anticipates the creation of the world, wills that there should be a world, and willing that there should be a world also wills that there should be godliness that's going to have a relationship with the world. And this godliness which is going to have a relationship with the world is in a significant way a chiddush, a new thing. It wasn't always. It exists in relationship with the world. And it has the possibility for 10 spheres. Or to say this a little bit more abstractly, the tzimtzum between the second level of Ein Seif and the third level of Ein Seif is that it is the beginning of what's called the separation of Pnimius Ha'oir from Chitzonius Ha'oir. Lifnei HaTzimtzum there is godliness. Lachar HaTzimtzum, there's going to be a godliness which is above world, and a godliness which is going to be in relationship with world, which is Igulim and Yesher, Sevav Kalaman and Kav. In Lifnei HaTzimtzum, the Ratzon for creation of the worlds, which also, in quote, creates this level of Ein Sof, sets up the possibility for the Havdalah between Pnimiyas Eir and Chitzenius Eir. The separation does not take place now. The separation is going to take place in the Tzimtzum Arishin, but the Tzimtzum now, in theory, allows that later the separation between Pnimiyas Eir and Chitzenius Eir should happen actually. And then, of course, according to Chassidus, according to Kabbalah, in this third level of godliness is where the Tzimtzum takes place. The Tzimtzum Arishin, the original Tzimtzum, takes place. Even though we've just discussed a variety of Tzimtzums pre-Tzimtzum Arishin, what Arizal calls the first Tzimtzum happens in this third level of Ein Sof, in the B'dregim Amalek Olam. In the next segment, I'll talk about the changes that happens in Ein Sof through the Tzimtzum Arishin.